I'd like to take a moment and welcome everyone and thank you for attending our Business Builder Speaker Series. My name is Doug Dean. I'm the owner and managing partner at Schaefertz and Dean. Our Business Builder Speaker Series was an idea born out of the COVID days in 2000. When we couldn't get together, we said, let's get together virtually once a month, and we'll bring a speaker on a topic that we think is of value to the lender and real estate agent communities that we serve. We host it the third Wednesday every month from 1 to 2 o'clock. An idea to get you tips and tricks from industry experts to help you grow your real estate business. We encourage you to stay connected with Schaefertz and Dean. We're on all the major socials, and find us and click the resource tab on our website and go to the Business Builder series. We record each Business Builder presentation. We save it on our YouTube channel, and then we link to it on our website so that you'll be able to, if there's something that you want to review from our presentation today, you'll have the opportunity to see it later. Or if you'd like to share it with somebody, you can go to our website and share the video with someone later. Mark your calendar now. The third Wednesday in July is July 17th, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock. Our next month's speaker will be Chris Patterson from Lone Mountain Insurance, talking about what real estate agents should know about home insurance. We thank you for joining us today, and we encourage you to make the best use of our time. We know that you're busy, and we appreciate you joining us. We encourage you to ask questions. Use the chat box, and I'll moderate the chat box and let Ryan know as we've got some questions. I'd now like to introduce and turn it over to Ryan Moore, Managing Partner and CSO at Market Valuation Services. And our topic today is what real estate agents should know about appraisals. We listed a few bullet points, but I'm going to turn it over to Ryan and let him take it from here. Ryan, thank you for joining us today and being our guest. I'm going to stop the share so that you can share your screen.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate you having me. Want to apologize in advance to the group. I've caught a little summer cold all of a sudden, so I'm a little raspy, maybe a little Barry Whitish if I dream big enough with my voice. But I'm glad you could join us today, midweek here in a June. So let me give you a little bit of a background for myself and my companies to give you an indication of why some believe that I may or may not know what I'm talking about. I got into industry in 1998. Back pre-2000, the market obviously was a completely different place, and I had a good fraternity brother of mine who was an appraiser, and I was in between jobs at the time, was coming off of a commercial leasing operation that I was involved in and looking for something else to do, and he told me about real estate appraising, and I said, if I get paid to drive around town, measure houses, listen to sports talk radio, that sounds like a pretty good gig to me. Didn't want to be behind a desk 9 to 5, so signed up. Fast forward a couple of years later, that same individual, Greg Hammond, and I opened up a company by the name of Market Value of Atlanta. And we grew that company to be one of the largest appraisal firms in the state of Georgia. At our peak, we were doing business in Georgia, Tennessee, the Carolinas, Alabama, and Florida. Fast forward a couple of years from that, and the market crash occurred. And I'll never forget the day that Greg and I had about 20 appraisers that were working for us, a half dozen internal staff, and we got one appraisal order in the door. And doing some quick math, we realized quickly that that wasn't going to work. So we reinvented ourselves, let everybody go, and positioned ourselves to where we were able to get into a newfound arena called appraisal management. Appraisal management companies came to be out of the market crash because the feds believed that there needed to be a buffer between the banks and the actual appraiser, liaison, if you will. So that created an opportunity essentially to do on a national level what we were already doing locally. Now, when I was appraising, um, before and after the market crashed for a little bit, I had homeowners and real estate agents ask me all the time, well, I bet people bribed you. I bet the lender always told you that they'll give you cash under the table if you didn't get the value that they wanted, or they weren't able to close the loan because of the appraisal. And that wasn't the case. More realistically, what happened was, if you don't make value, we're never going to send you an appraisal order again. That happened time and time and time again. So there was some validity into bringing appraisal management companies into the appraisal space. But like everything else, when you add another layer, sometimes things tend to get a little disconnected, and the process isn't as clean. We pride ourselves in my company that we've been able to maintain a great relationship with appraisers in the field, and we also have a great client base. So we're kind of dual facing. We face the clients as our client, who we owe our duty of care to, but we operate efficiently and effectively based on our vendor base, which is our appraisers. So coming out of that crash, we opened up Market Value of Atlanta. Market Valuation Services. Market Valuation Services, my current company. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia still, but we're in all 50 states, and we currently do, I would say on a weekly basis, we do business in all 50 states. Our bread and butter, though, is still Georgia and the Southeast. So if you remember the states that I outlined that we were prevalent in when I had the appraisal firm, that's kind of our bread and butter. So we're considered to be more of a regional appraisal management company with exposure and able to facilitate business nationwide. So what my role is now in the process is, I still have my lenders as clients, just like I did when I was an appraiser. They bring the order in, and then we put the appraisal work with a panel of appraisers, either appraisers that the client has brought to us and they want to keep in rotation, or appraisers that we know that we rely on a daily basis, or a hybrid of each. The lender doesn't know who the appraiser is, or is not supposed to know or have direct contact with, until after the appraisal has been completed. So our job is to ensure compliance. Our job is to ensure that the chain of communication is above board and accurate, and prevent any type of undue influence. Where we really excel with what we bring to the table is, with Greg and I both being real estate appraisers, we have a unique opportunity and perspective, almost, to where we essentially operate the same way we did when we were in the field as appraisers. We're just doing it at a management level, which is something that lenders desperately need, because a lot of people in my space aren't appraiser based. They're CPA based, accounting based, hedge fund backed, don't really understand the process of appraisals. So where we really leverage and where we really bring a benefit to our client is having that appraisal knowledge, and being able to talk the talk and walk the walk with the appraisers that we use on a daily basis. I do a lot of in-person speaking to board of realtors, realtor firms, on request of my clients. They bring us in and want to do stuff. And largely what we do at that point is kind of give them the background, similar to what I've done here. And then we evolve into a Q&A. What I wanted to do, though, before we got into the Q&A part, is maybe get out ahead of some of the most commonly asked questions that I get, or what we see reoccurring in the marketplace. So if you'll allow me to speak on that for a couple of minutes, then I'll get to any questions that you have, and be more than welcome to explain things from the appraiser side of the street, so to speak. So first and foremost, the appraisal is a flawed product. The reason it's a flawed product is that it's a real-time value based on historical data. So right there, that automatically creates a little bit of a disconnect between the realtor community and appraisers. Realtors are real keen and real in touch with what's currently going on in the marketplace, what you can and cannot get in the marketplace, and use that as a barometer in order to indicate or to peg what they believe the value of a home should be or where to list a home. Appraisers, again, by definition, they can take into consideration things that are actively going on, but in order to value a property, they have to use historical sales data. So in a perfect world, we would want the same floor plan to have closed 3 separate occasions the day before we saw the subject property that we were seeing, and all have closed for the exact same sales price with the exact same concessions, right? So that never happens. So you get a 9-month sale in there, you get a 12-month sale in there, you get a 3-month sale in there. You get split levels versus ranches on basements, traditionals on basements versus traditionals with finished basements, things of that nature. And that's when appraisers have to start adjusting for the marketplace. But again, based on historical data, not based on active listings and things that are presently going on in the marketplace. So one of the second misconceptions, I believe, or disconnects between the appraisal community and maybe the realtor community, is that when we make adjustments on an appraisal, and I assume that everybody on the call has seen an appraisal before, if maybe not in detail, just in passing, or you've had a home appraised of your own and you've actually seen the appraisal. We make adjustments for differences in appraisals, right? So, low-hanging fruit, if the subject has 2 fireplaces and the comp only has 1 fireplace, we may add $1,000, $1,500 on the appraisal for that comp in order to bring it up in line with the subject's 2 fireplaces. Well, immediately everybody's going to say, but Mr. Ryan, a fireplace doesn't cost $1,500. You are correct. In appraising, we adjust on contributory value, not cost. So what is the contributory value to a feature in a property? What is the contributory value to a 5-ton AC system versus a 3-ton versus 400 more square feet of finished basement versus 400 square feet less of finished basement? And the principle is this, is that, and this is the best scenario that I can come up with that I used to explain to people, is that if you take your car and you bought it piece by piece by piece, I mean, to the nuts and the bolts, it would cost you 10x, 20x what it cost you to buy that car in its entirety and drive it off the lot, right? So it's the same principle with real estate valuation. It's contributory, not cost. So again, that's one of the big disconnects, with realtors and appraisers is, for example, we'll hear, well, that pool cost $120,000 to put in, but the appraiser only gave it $40,000 worth of value. Well, that's what the appraisers determine the contributory value is of having the pool versus not having a pool. And how do they derive at that? Well, back to that example I gave of having 3 very similar same houses. If you have 2 homes, exact same, one has a pool, one doesn't. The one with the pool sold for $40,000 more than the one that didn't have the pool. You arrive at a $40,000 adjustment. Now that's real high level, real, simplistic explanation, but that kind of gives you an example of how appraisers get market data and how they use that. Another question that I get a lot is, what do I need to provide the appraiser? Or will an appraiser talk to me? Or, what am I allowed to say to an appraiser? Things of that nature. And there's some different opinions on what is and isn't warranted in the appraisal community. I know for me personally, and everybody that I trained, and I've trained, I would say over 100 appraisers in my lifetime, we always took the approach that the more information we had, the better. Because even if it's not relevant, we were provided it and we can discuss it in the appraisal report. We can say why this home was provided to us, but ultimately it wasn't considered because of X, Y, Z. And if it is relevant, then that's great. That's just more information that we can use and we can incorporate into the appraisal report. So I'm always in the camp of, please give me what you have. Send me the CMA you ran. Send me, why you priced the property at the way you priced that. Tell if you're a buyer's agent, tell us why they're willing to pay this for this house versus whatever the other 3 homes that they may have been looking at. Stuff like that allows me as an appraiser personally to formulate a more accurate assessment of value, and it gets into some of those intangibles that Doug had alluded to in the slide, some of the subjective factors in appraising. So I always wanted more information, the better. Now, how do I get that information? I'd love to have it sitting out on a kitchen countertop for me and not have to meet a real estate agent. I know that probably hurts your feelings. I know that's not what you wanted to hear, but appraisers are busy. They want to get in, they want to get out. The inspection piece of the process is the absolute easiest part of the process there is. And also in this day and age, emails. Emails are great. Send the PDF, send all the information you have, send the story behind why the buyers decided on this house versus the other. That's completely above board and relevant too. So what is some good rationale behind why your buyer or why your seller believes a property is worth what they're either willing to sell it for or what they're willing to pay for it? Well, back to my example. We've got a pool. The house down the street didn't have a pool. It sold for $700. I think we should sell for $750. Let's list it for $750, and we get a $740 contract. Same thing with the buyer. House down the street sold for $700, but it didn't have a pool. This one does. So we're willing to go up to $740 on our offer. Let's offer them $730, and then if they come back at a $740, we will take it. Great example of getting behind the buying process and knowing why your buyer wanted to do X, Y, and Z, or seller wanted to do X, Y, and Z. What I would consider to be bad information is they don't care what it's worth. They want to be in the school district and they're willing to pay whatever it takes. That's great for them, but that doesn't translate well to paper, and that's not exactly what underwriting or the lender is looking for. And unfortunately, as all of you are well aware right now, in the market that we are in, the market that we've been in now for a little too long, I think we can all agree, is we've got inventory problems they aren't getting better as quickly as I think we would all let them, or we would want them to be. And with that being said, that is creating these opportunities or situations where your buyer only has 3 options in whatever school district they want, or 1 option in the neighborhood that they want to be in. Then they get in a bidding process and they maybe get out over their skis a little bit, and sales to list, they're going over what the list price is with the contract and things of that nature. And look, there's always exceptions. There's always ways to justify legitimate value. But more often than not, in those situations, unless a property was just way underlisted, there's really no way for an appraiser to substantiate, going to 110% sale to list or 105% sale to list, or rolling in, $20,000 closing costs on a $400,000 purchase, things of that nature. So we see that frequently a lot, and we there's some friction between agents and appraisers that we mitigate on occasion in those scenarios as well. Also get quite, yeah, go ahead, Doug.
That's a great lead in to my first question.
Sure.
And you talked about how valuation is based on prior sales. Yet at the same time, we've talked about how agents can provide data that they believe is relevant to the appraiser in setting a current valuation. And the question I had is, if the agent said, well, this wasn't our only offer. We had 5 other offers for, the same purchase price. Are unaccepted offers relevant to establishing current value?
So I like where your head's at. I'd phrase it a little differently. The current value isn't contingent upon how many offers were made, but it's certainly relevant in my appraisal process, where I'm coming within a range and the agent can provide me. We had 5 different offers. The reason we chose this one is not because it was the highest, but because they were putting 30% down. They had a pre-qual letter, and their lending source can close in 7 days. That would be excellent information for an appraiser to be able to put into a report. And even if it was the highest offer, that's fine as well. It just it's a little responsibility. It's a little irresponsible for an appraiser just to say, okay, well, that was the highest offer, therefore it must be worth it. The market data is going to be the market data, but I certainly want the rationale behind why the offer was accepted. I would welcome that. And again, I don't think I mentioned this, but by and large, dealing with appraisers is like herding cats. They've all got their own opinions and all have their own mindset, and that we have rules and regulations and standards that we have to go by. But if you have 10 appraisers come out to a house, all 10 of them are going to come up with a different measurement. All 10 of them likely are going to come up with a different value. You just hope that they're all within a reasonable variance, where 2 are outliers and the rest are kind of bulk there in the middle. So yes, Doug, I would take that information into consideration for sure.
All right. Back to you, Ryan. Thank you.
Oh, back to me. Okay, sure. No problem at all. CMAs as well. When you're pricing your property, similarly, we want ranch houses to be compared to ranches, traditionals to be compared to traditionals. It's not a complete deal breaker, but if you're having to use a traditional in order to support a value on a ranch, or you're having to use a ranch in order to support a value on a traditional, it raises some red flags, particularly if you're in a slab or a crawl space type market. Think about some of your four in the doors in Dunwoody versus a traditional brick ranch on a crawl, things of that nature. Anytime you have a step element, it may be step meaning staircase, may appeal to a different set of buyers than it usually would. So we're careful to cross that line. One of the other big things that I strongly suggest that you bring awareness to when you're looking at properties is, even with traditionals with finished basement's not considered to be GLA in an appraisal report. Does it get credit? Absolutely. It gets plenty of credit. It just gets credit in a different place than the above grade square footage does in the appraisal report. So it's gotten better over the years because I think that's been a byproduct of the FMLS and MLS sources have gotten better with how they present tax records and historical data and things of that nature. But historically, it would be if we had a 3,200 square foot traditional home and it had 1,800 square feet basement that was finished, the agent would say, oh, well, this is a 5,000 square foot house. Well, not really. In appraisal terms, it's a 3,200 square foot house on an 1,800 square foot basement that's fully finished. But again, it's somewhat irrelevant because your appraisers are trying to compare apples to apples. They're going to compare that 3,200 square foot home to other similar properties of that size. The reason that's important is because if they were going to go along the line of thinking of it's a 5,000 square foot house, well, you start putting legitimate 5,000 square foot above grade homes on that report, and it completely skews the value of the subject because they're just two completely different animals. So that's another odd consideration that or an odd difference between appraisers and realtors. Split levels and split four-years are really confusing to a lot of people, and rightfully so. Some appraisers don't treat them the same as others. But if you look at ANSI measurements standards and you look at what Fannie says, there's two deal breakers when it comes to what's basement and what's not. So, and they are this: if you have any earth to improvement contact above the base level, then that's basement for that floor, right? So think about your traditional split level homes built in the 70s. If you go downstairs and you've got the windows, but the dirt comes up about 2 feet, 3 feet below those windows, that's basement area. The other litmus test is the portion of the house that you're trying to consider basement or not basement, is it above or below the main entry level of the home? So wherever you walk in the front door, if it's below that, most of the time it's going to be considered basement area. There are occasions where if there is no earth to improvement contact below, then appraisers can make exceptions. It's a lot of typing, and at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. So I think those are probably the big 4 or 5, Doug, that I see where appraisers and realtors tend to maybe not see eye to eye. I'm a big communication guy, so I think that there's a lot of room for improvement for appraisers to talk to realtors, and realtors to be able to talk to appraisers and be able to speak the language a little bit. And as we discussed, providing a little information, but providing it in a transparent way where everybody's kind of working towards the same goal. And what I mean by that is getting a loan closed. I mean, look, here's the reality that I don't think a lot of people realize. You know, appraisers are making somewhere between, call it $400 and $500 in an appraisal deal. So they need to be high volume as far as their work is concerned. No appraiser I've ever met wants to cut a contract. You do not want to cut a contract, because what happens when you cut a contract? Then all the questions start coming, the corrections start coming, the inquiries start coming, the requests for reconsideration of values start coming. So you're touching it again over and over and over again. So I'd like to give the appraiser that does cut a contract, I like to operate from a benefit of the doubt standpoint of he or she is not trying to induce malice into a situation. They're not trying to blow up a deal. They're not trying to, make a borrower's life worse. They just didn't have what they needed in order to support the value, because if they did, they would have got it. They would have got it there. And by the way, market value is defined at what's the most probable price between an eligible, buyer and seller to pay in a cash transaction for a piece of property, right? So that's why the contract comes into relevancy in the consideration as well. Now, here's the other truth of that too: is cash and/or its equivalent. Can you really consider 3% down and borrowing 97% of Doug Dean's money to be cash? Because I'd be willing to take a risk with 97% of Doug Dean or Bank of America's money over putting down 100% of my cash, right? So there's also that comes into place as well. So contracts are relevant, but it's not always the end all be all as far as what the value is concerned. Any questions, or ask me anything you want to ask. I'm good on my feet. I'm used to everything. If you've got any current deals going, if you have something that you lost before because of an appraisal, I'm more than happy to discuss that, give you my 2 cents for what it's worth, anything of that nature.
Brian, the first question that we had was back to the one that I had mentioned about our having numerous other offers, a consideration for computing a current value. And you gave us your thoughts, and Sandra asked if your response and line of thinking is pretty typical, common, shared among other appraisers. Would that be would most appraisers handle it the same way?
So, it gets a little goofy when I speak with most people, but it kind of goes back to what I had referenced with my philosophy as far as taking the more information, the better. I wish that was the case with all appraisers, but again, they can be a crusty old lot who can be defiant and want to do things their way. So they may all not be open to that type of input. If you are a buyer's agent, though, here's what I will tell you: is if you run into a situation where an appraiser is not willing to take into consideration multiple offers or data that you provided, or gave you the old thanks but no thanks, I think I have what I need, or I don't need your comps, I've got my own, let your loan referral partner know, because what can happen in that situation is, if I get enough feedback from my production staff, being my client production, my loan officers that send me work, hey, Ryan Moore, I just received the third notice from an agent this year that he didn't want to take information that they're willing to provide. Well, then my job as the AMC in my role in my company is I'm going to go have a conversation with that appraiser. And if he doesn't want to talk about it, well, then maybe we rotate him in a little less, or maybe we have a discussion with the client as to whether we want to include them on their panel or not. Which that brings up another thing too that I would strongly suggest. Not real time, so not when the cart's in motion, or not on one deal that you just got under contract. But by and large, when you run into an appraiser in your communities or in your markets that you work, that you like working with, that you respect, that you're like, you know what? Maybe we didn't see eye to eye on that, but that guy really knew what he was talking about, or that young lady was really sharp and gave me the feedback I needed in order to take this back to my client, explain to them the situation. Bring those to your loan referral partners as people. Hey, would you mind talking to your AMC about adding Doug Dean to their panel, or ask them if we can maybe get Doug Dean working in Peachtree City more often for us. And again, I can only speak for my company and myself. I'll take that feedback in a heartbeat, and I'll move Doug Dean to the top of the pile as far as rotation is concerned for the client, and make sure that he's getting consideration for more than his fair share of deals that come into place. So any pool of appraisers that you like working with, I strongly suggest you just mention to your banks and loan referral partners that you like working with these people, and is there anything you can do? And back to what I began with originally, at MVS, Market Valuation Services, my company, that's what we do really, really well. Your national players who are based offshore, who don't have an appraisal background, they typically don't service the client the same way that we do, and that's a different discussion. Those loan partners should probably reconsider using those vendors, and maybe look at somebody who's a little stronger regionally. So, what we got
Brian,
next?
We've got another great question, and it ties into a question that I had. When you go to do an appraisal, you start first by determining all the physical attributes of the subject property, which I presume you do in two ways. One is public record data available to you, and one is your own inspections and measurements. From that, you determine the characteristics of the subject property. Now you're looking to compare that property to other properties, and you're really looking for the one that is the most similar, the most closest in geography, and the most close in recency in time. So really looking for three things: what's the most similar, most recent, and closest geographically speaking. Which one of those do you give more precedence to the one that's more similar to the property that's older? How do those three, how are they sort of weighted between the three of them?
So,
and are there any other factors other than are those the three primary factors?
They're certainly considered. So the first thing an appraiser does, he has to identify what it is that they are appraising, right? So you have to, as you alluded to, public records, deeds, things of that nature, in order to identify what it is that's being appraised. Then from that, the on-site inspection occurs, and my rule of thumb when I was out there pulling tape for a living was that obviously anything that I saw with my own two eyes superseded any other data source, right? So if public records had the subject as having a carport, two-car carport, but the owners had enclosed it into a two-car garage 10 years ago, then it's a two-car garage. It's going on the report. It's not a carport that's going on the report, right? That's just a basic example. Then after you've got the subject information that you need post-inspection, and from the various data sources that we use to get additional information, then we're going into comparable selection. I think I need to start with, in the state of Georgia, it is actually in Georgia code, Georgia law, that the appraiser has to take into consideration and utilize sales in the subject subdivision prior to utilizing any other sales. Okay? Doesn't mean that she has to use the sale. They have to consider, and if they don't use the sale, they have to disclose why they didn't use the sale and why going a longer distance, going outside the development, was warranted in lieu of using developmental value indicators. So just based on that premise, I would state if you had to rank them, that falls under your closest, but developmental sales, always what we're looking at first and foremost. Okay. After that, similarity and time are probably interchangeable. Here's why. Fannie Mae guidelines, if we are in a changing market, whether values are going up or whether values are going down, and I've been in both markets in my lifespan in this industry, you have to have 2 90-day sales on the report because you have to be able to demonstrate 90-day sale activity, which gives Fannie greater confidence in you identifying whether market pricing as a whole has shifted dramatically in one direction, right? So if you're in a changing market, then you have to have 2 90-day sales. So that would qualify as you have to have, time in the consideration. Similarity, obviously, if I can get 3 sales on a report and there's no adjustments, then I've had a really easy day that day, and that's a really good a good problem not to have, because that means that I don't have to make many adjustments, and it's pretty cut and dry as far as what the value indication for the subject would be.
We've got a lot of good questions, and this one is sort of a two-parter that goes together. If the subject property is a 3-bedroom property, but all the most recent comps in the neighborhood are 2-bedroom properties, would you use older comps that are of the same size or newer comps of the 2-bedroom and make adjustment for the 3rd bedroom? And the second part of that question is there any good industry resource that a real estate agent could use to help make adjustments? In other words, these two are virtually identical. One's a 3-bedroom, one's a 2-bedroom. I hear all kinds of rules of thumb, square footage for a finished basement, on a per square foot base. So the first question is, ours is 3-bedroom, but all the 3-bedroom sales are older. Would you be better off with an older 3-bedroom or a newer 2-bedroom with adjustment?
So let's stipulate what older means. Older in appraising would be inside of 12 months. So it may be a 10 or 11-month-old sale versus a 2 or 3-month-old sale. Anything after 12 months, it really would be an atypical situation, not something underwriters want to see, not something Fannie wants to see, and it would have to be serving a specific purpose, right? So for the purpose of this, then older sale would be 10 to 12 months versus the newer sale. And in that case, here's how I would approach it personally, right? Is I would probably put 1 or 2 of the 2-bedroom sales on the report. I would put another 2 or 3 of the 3-bedroom sales on the report. Then I'd probably go outside the neighborhood and find a 3-bedroom home that had sold in a similar time frame of the last 90 days as the ones that just had sold in the neighborhood that were 2-bedroom, to tie it all in. Appraisers have a very I don't want to say get out of jail free card, but they've got a very unique tool that they unfortunately don't take advantage of a lot of times, and that is what we call the reconciliation of value at the end. And they reconcile the value, and in that reconciliation, they can state that in this example, I gave the 2-bedroom comps 0 weight in my reconciliation of value. They've only been provided in order to meet Georgia statutory law and to meet current Fannie guidelines. Greatest value was given to the 3-bedroom indicators inside the development, with additional support being provided by the 3-bedroom home that sold in the most 90 days, provided as comp 5, comp 6, et cetera, et cetera. So they can explain or dictate how much weight they're going to give to each sale in each indication. Where appraisers get themselves in trouble is they don't disclose something, and then it makes it look like they're hiding something, right? So fundamentally, what you're asking me, I think, is would I use them? I would use them in the sense that I would put the 2 bedrooms on the report, but I would not use them to arrive at the subject value. I'd use them for more of a disclosure basis than anything else. Fundamentally, I don't like using particularly in that example, 2 versus 3 or 1 versus 2. 3 to 4 gets a little bit better. 4 to 5 is kind of okay, because a lot of time when it goes to 5, you've got a bonus room situation, which some realtors may or may not have considered a bedroom, may or may not have a closet, things of that nature. But to an appraiser, there's a real big, and to the realtors as well, they see it. There's a real big market differential between someone who's buying a 3-bedroom versus a 2-bedroom, somebody who's buying a 1-bath versus a 2-bath. That 3-bed utility and that 2-bed utility is so much more superior than a 2-bedroom utility and a 1-bathroom utility, that even though you can adjust for it, you almost have to adjust so much for it. It just looks optically, it doesn't look that good, if that makes sense.
Okay. And the one question that comes up over and over is, what's the best way for agents to make adjustments for things like difference in square footage? I remember many years ago, the figure I was told is, oh, it's $100 a square foot. It's $40 a square foot for finished basement. It's, this, that, and the other. And I'm assuming that you have basically a manual that sort of gives you ballpark on these figures. But what would be a good resource to an agent to try to make adjustments for differences and compute? And I'm trying to remember your term, not cost, but
Contributory
value, right?
Yeah.
What's their best resource to determine contributory value?
Well, let's back up a second, Doug, and you would be wrong on the assumption of a manual. There is no manual.
Okay.
So again, back to the herding cats and to you get 100 appraisers, you got 100 different opinions. It's all market driven. And I'll give you another example while I'm trying to explain this. On the appraisal report, there's a line right below the comparable addresses and right next to the subject address on the sales grid that says dollar per square foot. Okay. And, you do the math. If it's 2,000 square foot home and it's sold for 400,000, it's going to say $200 a foot, right? And everybody's going to say, why didn't you adjust the 200 foot? Well, number one, that's not taking into consideration the fact that home's on 4.5 acres. It's also got a barn on it. It's got a garage. It's got an in-ground pool. It's really a throwaway number. But number two is, again, that's more of a cost than contribution, because you're taking the raw sales price and dividing it by the square footage. General rule of thumb. This is tough, Doug, because it varies so much from market to market. And I don't. Is everybody on the call in the Georgia market, or are we nationwide, or do we know?
I believe I'm going to take a stab that most everybody here is Georgia based.
Okay, Georgia based. We've seen dollar per square foot adjustments go up in the past couple of years. Probably largely due to the fact that we've seen so much pricing appreciation, almost at every single price point, almost in every single market. We're pushing more than 2x, sometimes 3x in some markets of where we were 10 years ago, right? So, with a $400,000 house, I would see somebody adjust anywhere from 40 on the low end to 70 on the high end for GLA, for their contribution, right? And keep in mind, in a perfect world, when appraisers are picking comps, you hope never to have any adjustments. Does that ever happen? Not very often, but so these adjustments may be 200 square feet, right? So at $70 a foot, you're talking a $14,000 adjustment. Somewhat negligible to the actual overall result, because appraisers value within ranges of everything, right? So up top, you've got your sales price range of the comparables. Then you make all your adjustments, and down below, you have your adjusted sales price range. The appraiser makes his appraised value inside of that adjusted sales price range. So you have a range, right? So again, kind of back to that reconciliation tool, we also have the tool, and we can call it the low end of that range. We can call it the high end of that range. So when you're talking about isolating specific variables in the report, it gets offensive to everybody because everybody has an opinion on it. And I tend to agree, right? I mean, I think probably your $100 number on a square foot is probably a lot more reasonable for contribution, but I can't tell you any appraiser I know who adjusts $100 a square foot on a $400,000 or $500,000 house. I don't see it.
Mhm. A couple other questions. One is, do you look at tax records, and what do you think about tax valuation, and particularly in Forsyth County? And then the second question is, do you also do commercial appraisals for either lenders or sellers?
So to take the easy one first, yes, we do. We've got a commercial network of appraisers that we utilize. Majority, we do probably 97% residential, 3% commercial work. But we do commercial, and we do it nationwide as well. On the first question, as far as tax records are concerned, I will start with a compliment. They have gotten better in almost every county as we've seen technology advance. Okay. However, here's the anti-compliment. Historically, and still currently, they are notoriously inaccurate. I mean, notoriously inaccurate, which is why we get a lot of times square footage being misrepresented on FMLS cards, or people thinking their home's bigger than it actually is. And the challenge becomes then, well, if you're starting from a position that you don't have good data, how could you possibly be providing an accurate valuation with a tax assessment if you don't even have the information correct, right? So in regards to tax valuation, we have seen another phenomenon, which isn't surprising, probably the past 5 years, is as we've seen this massive appreciation, these counties obviously need the income, and they've been more on top of reassessing properties and getting them more in line and reflective of market value. I would say still not terribly accurate, but closer. You know, when I first got, well, let's say when I first got in the business back in the 90s, you know, there'd be people who hadn't had their home reassessed by the tax assessor in a decade. You don't see that anymore. You know, so they're more in step. Like everything else, using a tax value it's just another tool. It's just it gives me an indication of kind of where I'm at, where my head's going, but I'm certainly not giving it much consideration in an appraisal report. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it means nothing because my value is going to be driven from the market data that I'm selecting currently, right?
That makes sense. There was a question, if you could clarify about the example I used with the more recent 2-bedroom and the older 3-bedroom, about going outside the neighborhood to get some 3-bedroom comps. Could you just kind of go over state that again, how that plays out?
Sure. So let's operate under the premise that Georgia law requires that we stay in the development when we have sales, and that they must be given consideration first and foremost before we consider anything outside of the development. Okay, appraisers have to do that. We can all agree on it. We can disagree on it, but we have to do it, right? So you're in a position where you're a 3-bedroom and all you have is 2-bedroom sales in the development. Okay, let's say we'll use round numbers. There are 4 2-bedroom sales in the development, no 3-bedroom sales in the last year. So now what am I going to do? Me personally, I'm going to put probably 2 of those 2-bedroom sales on the report. I'm going to go outside the development, pick up 3-bedroom sales that show market activity of 3-bedroom homes. More than likely, if they're specific competing communities to my subject community, then I'm going to give those sales greatest weight, if not all the weight, in the reconciliation process, and state that I provided the 2 bedrooms just as to be demonstrative of current activity in the subject development. However, they are not truly comparable to the subject due to their diminished utility versus a 3-bedroom property. Another thing that I would use as an appraiser as well is, say I don't have the 3-bedroom sales in the neighborhood that I need, but let's say I have 2 other active listings. I'll throw those active listings on there, right? The active listings can't be used to arrive at a value for a subject, but they certainly can be used to support the argument for the value that you're making for the subject, right? Because active listings are just active listings. They're not closed. So they may never close. They may never, but it's a snapshot of what's currently right now being offered. So we can use that to tie in the entire report and to give us substantiation of why the 2 bedrooms sales are pretty irrelevant, and we need to be looking at the 3-bedroom sales. And here's why the value is what the value is.
That makes sense. And in that respect, it's more important to compare like to like than homes within the same neighborhood that are more dissimilar.
Correct.
And the comment was, thank you. That makes sense.
Perfect.
Anyone else have any questions, any war stories about their appraisals that they'd like to think through? If not, Ryan, we're sort of approaching the end of our hour, and there's nothing magic about an hour, but that's usually where we target it. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to toss out any. If not, Ryan, I'll ask if you've got some closing remarks, and we will wrap it up.
Sure. Just to be able to provide service to all of you as a community. In the appraisal management space that I'm in, my clients, again, are the people that are lending the money. They're brokers, they're banks, they're wholesalers, things of that nature. But I do have a Rolodex of 10,000 appraisers nationwide. So if you need an appraiser for a pre-list, if you need an appraiser for a estate property, or a tax abatement or anything of that nature, feel free to always reach out to me or my company. And I've got plenty of appraisers that I directly refer. I don't have anything to do with that. I don't take any money off of that. It's just that here are appraisers I know in your market who we trust, and I'm happy to share their name with anybody who would want to use them in that type of capacity that doesn't fall into the appraisal management space.
Ryan, if you're agreeable, I can put your chat or your contact information in the chat window.
Sure.
If you need appraisers in your market, contact Ryan Moore at MVS. And what would be the best contact information you'd like to have in the program?
Do R Moore, RMOORE.
Yes, sir.
At MVSVC.com.
That's R Moore at Mike Victor Sierra Victor Charlie.com.
That's it.
MVSVC.com. Fantastic. And I will also throw my contact information in the chat. And when we produce the video, we'll add those to a graphic here at the end, so everybody will know how to reach out to you and I, Ryan. Ryan, I'd like to thank you again. I've found it as someone who's been a real estate attorney for 20 years. I know a lot of this sort of just anecdotally from being around, but I think it's the most in-depth and best description I've gotten of behind the scenes with an appraiser. So I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Doug. I appreciate it.
Give me just another minute to put the information in the chat window so anybody can grab it if they need it. And to you, Ryan, our thanks again for being our guest speaker today on the Business Builder Speaker Series. Ryan's contact information is in the chat. And from all of us at Schaefertz and Dean, we thank you for being our guests and joining us today. One of my favorite quotes is from the Kenny Rogers song, The Gambler, and that's that I hope you found an ace that you can keep. So I hope you took away some good value from our time today. We will save the video, clean it up, add the credits and the theme music, post it to our YouTube channel, and then we'll link the YouTube channel directly under the Resources tab on our website. And when it's ready, we'll send everybody a link so that you can go back and review it later and share it with your colleagues. And thank you again for joining us. And at Schaefertz and Dean, we look forward to helping you with your next closing, or our tagline, where everyone walks away happy. So we look forward to the opportunity to work with you again in the future.
Thanks again, Doug.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Take care.